Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
podcast for parents and families everywhere.
Whether you have kids that plan to attend college or you have current college students, you want them in and you want them to graduate.
You want a quality education that will give you a skill set that will make you marketable for the jobs of today and the jobs of tomorrow. I am Mark Stucker, and I'm a college coach from Metro Atlanta.
And I am Anika Madden, and I am a parent, also from Atlanta, currently in North Carolina.
And I'm David Williams, and I'm a dad from Chicago, Illinois.
This week in the news, California's rejection of affirmative action affects university admissions. An article by Lindsay, Augustine, and Andrew Tolu of Scott Scoop. Mark and Anika will discuss how can I save thousands of dollars through exams and creative college programs. Our question from a listener is, I'd like to know more about Pomona and some of the routes to getting in. Our interview is with Amin Gonzalez, the Vice President and Dean of Admission and Financial Aid at Wesleyan. And this is part 1 of 2 on Understanding Wesleyan University. And we will have no college spotlight, as this interview will take the place of that college spotlight.
Couple of announcements, Dave. Remember how a lot of these colleges came out and said they were going to drop test scores for 1 year and then go back? Well, It's interesting because this week, a bunch of them announced that they will be going test optional again for the class of 2022. So schools like Cornell, Columbia, University of Pennsylvania, Williams, to name some, all announced within the last few days that they will be test optional for year 2. So it's going to be fascinating to see, do the rest of all the other selective schools that went test optional just for this year, ones that didn't commit to dropping it permanently or doing a 3-year experiment, if they follow suit. And then it's also going to be fascinating to see if then year 3, if they make that permanent. Because the thing about this year is they're still able to say that the pandemic interrupted the ability for juniors to take the test. But after you've done something for 2 years and you get comfortable with it, our friend Sam Prouty might be right. It might be looking like the old rotary phone, going back to test scores. We'll see.
I think it's looking like the rotary phone.
Now, another fascinating thing came out this week. Bad news, then, for one school, I guess good news. The whole SUNY system, State University of New York system, down 20% in applications. And for some of the CUNY colleges, even more. But another school in the state of New York has all of us college admissions people talking, and I was on with several directors this week having this conversation. Colgate University. Guess how much they increased their apps, Dave?
30%.
102.
Wow. Just like going test optional?
So 3 big things happened, and people think, one, they did go test optional. Huge. Secondly, they joined QuestBridge. I'm going to be talking more about QuestBridge in our question from a listener today, later with Anika. Because a lot of people will hear that name and they're probably not sure what that is. But anytime you join QuestBridge, you're going to get a lot of apps.
Right.
And then they went no loan for incomes up to $125,000.
That'll do it.
So those 3 things, but still, they went from something 9,000 something apps to over 18,000. Crazy. 1 year.
Wow. Good for Colgate.
Not good for the readers.
Yes. No. You might want to move that school down a category from a safe to a maybe, or a maybe to a reach, or a reach to a no way.
Okay. It is time for admissions tip and admissions vernacular. So, admissions tip. A lot of schools are moving from in-person interviews to video interviews. Some cases it's because of the pandemic. In some cases, this actually happened prior to the pandemic in the last year's class. So you're seeing schools like Brown and WashU and St. Louis University that I've featured recently using these video interviews. And so my advice is practice your video interview. And in some cases, they're like wide open, like a Brown or a WashU. They kind of let you say whatever you want to say about yourself. How do you want to represent yourself? They'll give you maybe 90 seconds or 2 minutes. And you can put something together, pictures, images, just talking. They leave it wide open. the cases slew, certainly for their scholarships, they're giving you 5 minutes to answer one question. And so my advice is get used to delivering and conveying yourself in a video interview. You can be really creative in some of these things. In other cases, you can have like a teleprompter if you're answering specific questions in the back and nobody can see the teleprompter, like on a video cam, and it just scrolls down. I had a student do that this week, and I gave them that advice, and they found it to be extremely helpful. So that's the tip of the week.
And check out YouTube on how to best set up your camera and position yourself and light yourself for the interview. It makes a big difference.
All right, Dave. I'm giving you vernacular that's going to somewhat tie into our conversation today.
All righty.
This is one of these ones that I never heard this one time when I did admissions, college admissions or boarding school admissions. Now, you kind of can't go anywhere without hearing it. It's a tough one, and the term is BIPOC. BIPOC. Any idea what BIPOC is?
BIPOC is an extraterrestrial being from the planet Bipocian who interacted with the Vulcans in AD 2024 during the warp drive that led them to the humans during the First Contact episode of Star Trek.
Stop while you're behind. So we all know this. There's been evolution of so many names referring to people of color, right? Whether it was Negro or Black or people of color or African American. You know, when I was doing admissions, we used to say transgenerational descendants of slaves if we wanted to differentiate people who trace their heritage back to slavery versus Africans or Afro-Caribbeans. The new term is BIPOC, and it stands for Black Indigenous People of Color. Wow.
Well, two things. I was right. They are from the alien planet of BIPOC that met up with the Vulcans during the First Contact.
I'm going to take your black card away for not knowing that, man.
And two, I'm still old. I'm still stuck on Negro. I'm just past colored and I'm on Negro.
Oh, yeah, I forgot colored people. I forgot that one.
That's right. BIPOC. Brother, I'm still adjusting to black.
Okay. Well, just listen. Now that you've heard it, I bet you'll have your ears open. You'll be starting to hear BIPOC.
We'll say it one more time. What's that?
Black Indigenous people of color.
Black Indigenous people
it's basically people tracing their lineage back to slavery and a history in America as opposed to like African immigrants or Caribbean immigrants.
Am I going to hear it on a rap song? Like, you know, yo, my BIPOC.
Stop while you're behind, man.
All right, no problem.
I intentionally picked that one for our affirmative action topic. I've been holding off on that one, keeping that one in my back pocket for a few months on you. All right, take it away. Let's turn to college hot topics in the news.
All right, well, this is an interesting article. Basically, California's rejection of affirmative action affects university admissions in Scott Scoop, article by Lindsay, Augustine, and Andrew Tolu. Well, basically, it talks about Proposition 16, which would have repealed Proposition 209. So let's talk about 209. 209 was an amendment to the California state constitution that prohibited government institutions from considering race, sex, and ethnicity when it came to public employment, contracting, and education. As the article says, it effectively criminalized affirmative action. And Proposition 209 passed in 1996 by a 10-point margin. Almost 54% of Californians agreed to repeal that, despite staunch opposition from most political leaders and many celebrities, etc. Proposition 16 would have been a proposition to repeal that amendment. And that was actually a fairly well-funded campaign of almost $20 million, led by the likes of Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris and civil rights organizations. And at the time of its proposal, many polling had shown that the public had swung quite in favor of affirmative action as opposed to 10 to 20 years ago. So it was quite surprising that this proposition, this amendment to repeal Proposition 209, actually failed by almost as large a margin as the Proposition 209 passed in 1996 by over 10 points. And so this really talks about the reasons why that might have happened, and it also talked about people's reaction to it. So, Mark, I'm actually going to stop here and get your input and see where you want to take this quite expansive topic, since it also ties into some other articles that we were reading at the time.
Yeah, Dave sent me a really good article as well from USA Today on this topic. So this is our second time we've talked about affirmative action. If you're interested in this topic, I did a really deep dive on the history of it, going back on 128. So this is another place you can go if you want to understand the history and the 5 to 6 major Supreme Court decisions that have happened around affirmative action over the last almost 50 years now. So there's a lot to say. So let's talk about some of the reasons why affirmative action is in place. One is historic inequities. Slavery, segregation, history has created inequities and an opportunity to level the playing field. Another reason is the case for diversity. So when you're around different people who think different from you, had different experiences, you not only get a better education, but you're prepared to go into the real world. Those are really the two strongest cases you'll see for why colleges have affirmative action. And then some might argue that their career partners, their corporate partners are oftentimes demanding. They want more diverse talent, and so they're getting it from their corporate partnerships. But normally that's the third one is not as big as the first two. The first two fundamentally affect education on the campus. And so where I want to go with this, Dave, is I think affirmative action needs a rebranding. I think it needs a makeover. And we've been having the same conversation now for decades, and it hasn't really advanced much. In fact, the article says, over 20 years ago, Prop 209 passed, 54% of Californians were against it, 56% were against it this time. And I know there's a lot behind that. I know Ward Connerly got involved, and I know there's a sociologist out of Tufts that talked about it was framed wrong. It's all in the framing. So remember, Dave, you remember when I did a thing on environmental context dashboard?
That's correct.
And how the SAT was trying to push back against people saying it has so much class and education bias in it. And so we need to provide this context. But then there was pushback because, it got labeled as an adversity score by the Wall Street Journal. And there was a lot of blowback. Well, what did they do? They came out and a new version called Landscape.
Right.
Didn't have that emotionally explosive adversity score connotation. And so far, it's been pretty well received.
Yeah.
I think this is what affirmative action needs, because here's the dilemma you have with affirmative action. This is a quote in the article, actually the USA Today article you sent me. It says, the voters see admission, particularly at selective institutions, as a zero-sum game where there are losers and winners. That doesn't strike the voters as fair. So here's this kind of how I see affirmative action. I've been thinking about this a lot. So you get in this debate of race versus class. There's some people that say, well, why do you need any type of racial preference at all? Can't you just use class and look at who's been disadvantaged from socioeconomic means? And then other people come back and say class is extremely important, but so is race. You can't just completely discount race. And then so those who argue for race, they don't want to have any concessions at all. And then it leads to the impression, well, why should a person of color, let's say a black person, that's, multimillionaire get a preference over somebody who's more poor? And then it doesn't settle with the voters as fair. And a classic example of this is when Barack Obama was interviewed on This Week with George Stephanopoulos back in 2007. And he tried to really push Barack Obama whether racial preferences were needed anymore. And I don't know, do you remember that, Dave, or not?
I vaguely do. I think you'd have to. I do remember, but now that you bring it to my attention, yes.
Yeah, and so it was interesting, the interview, and Obama weighed in the affirmative action debate, race versus class, and pretty much what he said was he doesn't think anyone should cut his two daughters any slack when they apply to college because of their race. Yeah. Something that you've said over and over about your daughter, Dave. Lauren doesn't deserve any slack. You've been privileged, and And that's your perspective. But other people have not wanted to give up on race because let's look at the two purposes of affirmative action. Historical inequities, there's definitely a racial component to that isn't completely covered by class. Preparing people for the real world, there's a racial component of that, having the Black experience or the Latino experience or the Native American experience, or in some cases, some Asian groups are beneficiaries of affirmative action, some are not. It depends if they're underrepresented. There's a big difference between Vietnamese and Laotians and compared to certain other ones. So that's case by case and it's campus by campus. So here's where I'm standing. This is kind of a slightly new view for me. I'll bounce it off you. The term affirmative action, it immediately implies to a lot of majority students and parents that an underqualified person is getting my spot. That's just an implication. But that's not what the meaning of it is. It means the school is taking affirmative actions. Let's take it away from the context of race. WPI, Worcester Polytech Institute, they are trying to get as close as they could to 50-50 by gender. So they created a fly-in program for women in engineering. Got the school up to 43% women in engineering. That's an affirmative action that's taken to try to improve their campus. So this is where I'm coming down on this, Dave, and I'd like to have your thoughts.
Right.
I think affirmative actions should be kept in track for any underrepresented group, not just by class, because having that experience matters. So maybe you do host special breakfasts or do events like that to help create an allure and attention and attraction for your campus because it's competitive out there. For underrepresented students, it's super competitive. So I don't see anything wrong with taking certain affirmative actions like summer programs and different things like that to create interest, because having all perspective on the campus will give people a better education. You want a mixture of different socioeconomic groups within your racial cohorts. But I think when it comes to admission standards, I think that you can bend the curve more for class inequities. So that's kind of a nuanced view. It's not completely diminishing race, but it has a role for race, but maybe a different role than we've seen historically. And I just think that affirmative action is stuck in a rut. And I know there'll always be resistance to it anyway, because if anybody, there's going to be a certain percentage of the population that's going to feel like if it's helping somebody other than me, then I'm not interested in it. But I feel it needs a little bit of a makeover because I feel like we're in the same rut. Even that some surveys showed 56% of people are for affirmative action now, nationwide up from 49. 70% of Asians are for affirmative action, only 26% against, only 16% against. So anyway, I've talked a lot. I want to listen to you and just see what you think.
Yeah. Mark, I actually think that the term affirmative action has to be retired and the programs have to be revamped.
So we agree.
That's right. I don't think it's politically viable anymore. And part of the reason is when affirmative action was first instituted in the 1960s, the percentage of the population that were actually African American or Hispanic or anything multicultural was much, much smaller. 82% of the voting population was still pretty much white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And that was reflected in many of these institutions. So to jumpstart things, you really did need to consider race, especially given the extreme discrimination that existed at the time. But now we're in a much different environment. I mean, the majority of kids under 18 are majority minority. States like California are majority minority. Many of the emerging South is trending majority minority. And when you have a situation where the majority of the population is comprised of minority students, it's a lot harder to argue or politically justify, in my mind, giving preferences based on race as opposed to socioeconomic opportunity. And the other thing, too, is in the last 4 years, race has been so politicized by the Republicans and Trump and so forth that going forward, I just don't see how And with the changed makeup of the Supreme Court, I just do not see how affirmative action in its current format will survive. So that's bending to the reality that we have to find other proxies to create diversity. And I believe those proxies exist. I think they're tougher. I think that they require more energy and imagination and ingenuity and deeper thinking. But I think that's where we have to go to. But affirmative action, as we understand it, I think is politically dead in the water.
Well, so let me say a couple of things. I completely agree with your point of the more diverse America. And I think that's one of the things that did affirmative action in a little bit in California. For one, California has implemented ELC, eligibility in local context, which was one of my missions vocabularies a while ago, man. You know, the ability to look at how you're doing in your individual high school and factor that into the UC system's decisions. Mm-hmm. But check out the stats for the incoming, University of California systems class. 45% first gen, 44% low income, 36% Latino, 35% Asian, 21% white, 5% black. Like that's California. Not every state's like that. Okay, we talked about New Hampshire the other day, but and we have to be very careful to not paint every single state the same or every region, even portions of the state the same, right? But that's your point on diversity and how things have changed. What do you think about? I think we both agree that there needs to be a rebranding, and there needs to be some more sophistication and nuance.
But I want to go further. I think the import and impact of affirmative action has been way overstated. I actually don't think that affirmative action is a significant force these days. I go back to, first of all, the book of The Shape of the River, a seminal work.
It was a long time ago. Princeton professor.
It was Bill Bowen, Eric Bach of Yale.
Yeah.
And at that time,
the 90s,
they pointed out, that's right, they pointed out that only 17% of higher education institutions employed any form of affirmative action. 83% were just not competitive enough for affirmative action to make a difference. And then I look back in the emphasis of our podcast, Mark, where we talk about that there was way too much focus on the top 1% of colleges. And the fact is, I don't care what race you are, black, white, Latino, whatever. I don't care what academic level you're at, A, B, C student. I don't even care what type of monies you bring to the table. There are great colleges for you, regardless of your perception of their selectivity or the abilities you bring to the table. And the other thing too is when I do look a lot, especially state flagship schools, those numbers have not budged. When you exclude athletes, the number of African Americans at most of these schools are less than 5%. The number of African Americans at the Ivy League colleges have not changed percentage-wise, with the exception of the top, Harvard and Yale. They've gone up. But for the last 20, 30 years since I was there. So I just think that the impact of affirmative action has been way overstated. And quite frankly...
Well, let me tell you what I see.
Yeah.
And this is why I've developed this perspective that I still think race matters, and I think having a critical mass matters, and I think having affirmative action is differentiating between recruitment activities and bending the admissions curve a little bit is an important distinction. Because what I'm seeing is schools are getting their diverse students of color. I'm talking mostly here about the most selective schools. They're getting them mostly from Black and Latino, and if it's a school that's using affirmative action for Asian populations, they're getting it mostly from families that make over $200,000.
Absolutely.
That have usually both parents graduated from college. Oftentimes, masters or professional degrees. Yeah. And so maybe I should take a step all the way back. Every school has their idea of what they think of as a balanced class. They have that by race. They have that by international students. They have that by gender. And so, it's not necessarily a strict quota, but they have in mind. Let's say a school kind of says, we kind of think we should maybe be about 10% Black. Okay. What I see them doing is taking those spots mostly from families that would do fine wherever they went to college.
Correct.
And so the original purpose of affirmative action to help address, redress some of society's inequities, it has been lost because they can just grab a professional family that gets all the benefits of higher education from parents, higher sophistication, private schools or really good suburban schools, good tutors, grew up seeing reading all the time, went to summer camps, traveled internationally, all of those kinds of advantages. That's the same advantages of wealthy whites. And of course, it creates higher test scores, a stronger statistical profile. And those are the people that are getting through and getting the admission slots. And if a school says, yeah, we kind of would like to maybe be about 10% Black, maybe 10% Latino, whatever their idea of a balanced class is, it's going to vary a little bit from school to school and the geography and the demographics of that location. They're filling up those spots with more privileged families. And I think that's what needs to stop.
Well, I completely agree, Mark. I mean, the reality is we look at the African Americans that they're taking from Chicago. They're all from high-income earner families. They all have standardized test scores in the 99th percentile. You took away their racial status, they would still getting into, if not that college, another comparable college because they're sort of indistinguishable. And then you add up the fact that, okay, we might be African American, so you're conveniently taking that spot. The kid that is not getting in is a single parent public school kid from the inner city of Chicago. That's just not happening, except in really rare, stupendous cases. But 98% of the spots going in affirmative action, in my opinion, from what I see, go to a socioeconomic strata indistinguishable from their white peers. So I think that's a big problem, and it has not been adequately addressed in the last several decades.
Yeah, and I think in some ways, the way affirmative action is currently constituted allows that to be perpetuated.
Correct.
Because the thing about these schools, particularly the private schools, is for the most part, there's a lot of sort of homogeneity around social class, regardless of how much they claim how diverse they are. Take a look at their Pell Grant numbers. Pell Grant students are 39% of the population. There's schools that are thrilled to say that they're at 15% Pell.
That's right.
But there's a cultural component to it too. Like it's easier for somebody from an upper middle class family to fit in if it's a cocktail party or if you're going skiing is your main activity on the weekends.
Right.
And this is where the hard lifting has to occur on the part of schools. If they really, truly want to change society and reach another sector, they're going to have to make some changes because it's harder accepting people that culturally are a little different from your normal student body.
And we haven't mentioned, Mark, the international dynamic, that in fact the percentage of African Americans has been going down for years, while schools have been maintaining that they have increased or maintained their affirmative action scores. Well, a lot of them are foreign students from Nigeria or the Caribbean who have had excellent education and who have scores that are identical to Asians in many ways. And those kids are getting in and are being counted as part of the affirmative action statistics. And they're not even they're not even BIPACs. Is that it? Black, Indigenous.
BIPOC, man, get it right.
BIPOC.
You're gonna go Star Trek and start using space stuff, man. Get it right.
Well, I was about to say Tupac, but that's okay.
Dave, showing a little rap knowledge off.
That's right, man. If I inherited my latest rap, it don't exist, man. BIPOC. Anyway, but they're not even BIPOPs, man. Whatever that is. But getting to the point is that I think that there's been a lot of issues with how the affirmative action programs have actually taken the easy way out and filled its ranks with students that truly don't represent the underrepresented. And I think that has led to a lot of cynicism, and rightly deserved, on the population at large as to the true utility of affirmative action. So, I mean, I think it's, I think its time has come. I do not see it surviving.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about whether it'll survive with 3 conservative Supreme Courts.
Yeah.
I think one might get the impression from what you said that you're against race-based affirmative action. You should exclusively go to class 100%, which is an argument that Edward Blum and those who are anti-affirmative action have said. And I don't have that view. I think that I'm taking a more nuanced view that affirmative actions can be used in recruitment, but when it comes to admission standards, you can have a lower bar for someone that has had more societal class disadvantages, but you need to keep the bar high for somebody privileged. But you can use recruitment. Because remember, affirmative action, people think of affirmative action, they think of lowering the standard to take a less qualified person over me. That's what they think, but that's not actually what it is. It's being proactive. Affirmative action means it should mean you're using creative and proactive ways to recruit underrepresented groups on your campus so that you can have a stronger campus. And I still contend there's a place for that with race. But, and I just want to make sure, are you saying that and I'm not talking about the political realities, I'm about your view. Are you saying that you're for abandoning any sensitivity to race at all and just basically the Edward Blum view who brought the case against Harvard? No. Because that's what it sounds like.
Well, look, I think you can use race, but if I was running an affirmative action program, I'd find other proxies. Geography is one, zip code is one. You can go by zip codes. If you wanted to get any racial composition in the United States, you can go by zip codes and just look at underrepresented zip codes. And through those zip codes, create any type of class you want. But you got to be smart about it.
Well, let me give you an example of this, Dave. And I think it's been good. One of the things I do commend a lot of schools for, and Texas is an example. They've gone with that. You're in the top 6% at any school.
Correct.
That's impressive. Only 1 out of 17 kids is in the top 6%. Right. Now, you're the top 6% at your school, may not have the same resources, may not have all the APs of the same caliber teaching, or, go on and on and on with all of the advantages or lack thereof. But that's impressive. And so I've actually pretty impressed with some of the programs like California's eligibility in local context. We're going to take a look at where are you within your own school. And if you're one of the top people within your own school, then you're surmounting a lot of obstacles. So I'm actually pretty impressed with some of the, that's one of the proxies I think that's a good one, is looking at who's at the top of their class, even if it's an underperforming school.
Correct. So let me modify that. Affirmative action based on race was never meant to be permanent. In fact, Sandra Day O'Connor, when she actually upheld it in the case it brought in 1985, saying, okay, but there is a time limit on this, and she threw out possibly 25 years. Well, we've exceeded that. The reality is that we cannot continue with race-based programs indefinitely for a variety of reasons. So the sooner we find suitable proxies, the better. And so while we can continue to use race as a characteristic for now, I just don't think it's realistic to believe that that's going to continue. And the sooner that we can find other ways to establish true social, economic, and cultural diversity, I think the better.
Yeah, but I'm just going to make a statement. Race still matters.
Yeah. Well, of course, race still matters, Mark. But the fact is, legally, can you still use it, or will you be able to use it to achieve a desired end? And I'm just saying that I just think it's going to be found unconstitutional.
Yeah, but I'm not. I think there's a difference between what is unconstitutional, or what will eventually be seen as unconstitutional, versus that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about what do we think is the right thing to do. And I just want to be clear about what your position, because you're sounding to me like Edward Blum, who brought the case against Harvard. And I know that's not your view, Dave. I know that's not your view, but that's how it's sounding. And I just want to make sure that you clarify that.
What I'm saying is now, today, at this moment, post Donald Trump, knowing where we're headed and knowing how this country has been racialized, I believe that the appropriate stance going forward is to find other proxies other than race to establish these goals. That while affirmative action may have been defensible in the past, based on a variety of reasons, that those reasons are no longer workable in today's environment.
All right. Well, then, yeah, we do have slightly different views then.
Right.
Because I'm not going to let Donald Trump dictate my policy and what I think is best for my institution. Like, I still think it makes it. I still think someone having the Black experience and what that means, that matters in terms of helping other people understand what it's like to be around Black people. And that prepares you if you're going to work with Black people or live with Black people. And there's still value to that. And I'm not going to walk away from that. And I'm not going to apologize for that. That's not something,
then substitute that with the urban experience or the rural experience or the international experience or the experience of being in a broken family or the experience of living under certain socioeconomic standard. There are proxies that we can use that can capture all those nuances. They're harder to implement. They're more blurry. They're not quite as precise. They take more effort and work, but they'll be held constitutional.
Yeah, but you keep going back to what's constitutional, and that's not where I'm trying to. That's not the conversation I'm trying to. I'm trying to have. You're in charge. You're in control. What do you think is the best thing? Not what do you think Congress will allow in 10 years?
What I think is the best thing is that we strive to become race neutral and we find appropriate proxies to still create diverse environments, both racially, ethnically, culturally, religiously, urban-wise, but we have to do it by different proxies. I think that affirmative action has been a flawed system. I think it's been poorly executed and instituted, and I believe that it will not survive the coming attacks. Ergo, I think it's just you're spinning your wheels if you're going to continue down that pathway without trying to find appropriate other remedies.
Yeah, and I think you do both ends. I think all the proxy stuff is extremely important. I think that, all the things we talked about, how schools have been skimming upper middle class kids of color and saying, look, we're diverse. I think that needs to stop. But I'm not going to apologize for race being a factor. And I'm not going to let Donald Trump dictate to me what I think is right. I think race still matters. Race is still important. And I think and I'm going to unapologetically, unabashedly say that I think it still should be considered at some level and not, I mean that, like, I know you don't want to be confused with Ed Blum, but if you look at his rationale, it's exactly what he's saying. But exactly what he's saying is it's time to use anything other than race, but you don't use race, use everything but race. And I'm just going to say there's still a place for race. And I'm going to say that unapologetically because race still matters in America. Having a racial perspective and the racial experience still is helpful, whether it's helping other people understand how different people from different races think, whether it's what you bring to the relationships in the dorm or to the conversations over the meal or the conversations in the classroom. I think it elevates the campus, and I'm going to say that unapologetically. So I'm all for all the other proxies, but I'm not for getting rid of race 100% as one of them. So anyway, I think we are fairly close, but maybe a little different.
All right. Well, my brother BIPOC, let's put a bow on that.
I have a feeling I'm going to be hearing some BIPOC from you for a while, man. I gave you a new name, man.
Tell me, from Tupac to BIPOC.
So, I have to tell our listeners, Dave and I, we talk all the time. I've intentionally avoided this because sometimes we're having these great conversations and I'm like, you know what? We should have had that on the podcast. Now when we do it again, it won't be natural. Yeah. So I intentionally held off just getting into the nuance of how we may think a little differently just because let's do the real live thing in for our listeners. So, all right, BIPOC.
That's great.
Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process.
Do you know why I did that, Anika? I'm not drunk. I'm not inebriated.
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't my computer going anyway.
And it wasn't, well, you know what? On the golf course, that's me too. You know, when you play golf, if you have an errant shot and you're about to hit someone in the head with the ball. So I have plenty of practice of yelling 4. But I'll give you a hint. That's not why I did it. Any guesses?
Not a wad of clue.
You're thinking my podcast partner is really losing it over there.
Gracious.
This is the first episode in year 4.
Oh.
So now, see why it was warranted?
Okay. I don't have the strength to yell, but ditto.
Did I recover from losing my marbles in your mind at least?
Yes. Happy anniversary.
Remember I played that one time? It's your anniversary.
Yeah,
I played that song. I sure did.
I do. Oh, hey, 4 years.
So anyway, back to Twitter followers. A lot happening in the same week. It's also the week we reveal the number 1 Twitter account. I'm going to go all the way to number 10 on this just because it is what it is.
Okay.
And these numbers have changed as they go up. They update it all the time. So we have in the 10th position, Kim Kardashian now with 68.5 million followers. And number 9 is Ellen DeGeneres, 79.4. Number 8, Ariana Grande, 80.8. Number 7, Lady Gaga, 83.2. Number 6, Taylor Swift, 88 million. Number 5, Cristiano Ronaldo, 90.3. Number 4, Rihanna, 100.4 million. Number 3, Katy Perry, 109.2. Number 2, Justin Bieber, 100. Oh, by the way, I found out he didn't go to Woodward Academy, by the way.
No.
That was a rumor.
Whoops. Okay.
Woodward Academy is a private school in Atlanta. There was rumors he was there. 113.7 million followers. Okay, I'm giving you 2 guesses at number 1.
Barack Obama, Michelle Obama.
You got it. You looked it up and cheated.
No, I didn't.
Really?
I didn't. Mm-mm.
You know his popularity.
Mm-hmm. I knew it was one of the 2. Or they're together.
7.9 million followers.
Mm-hmm.
Barack Obama.
My besties. I knew my besties would be at the top.
So too bad Michelle didn't make it, but anyway. We'll come back. We'll do this again. I got another one next time that we'll roll out that I think people will like. I'll tell people what it is. It's the universities that have the most Fortune 500 CEOs.
Oh, interesting.
And that's actually a countdown of 20 because there's like 11 people tied at one spot.
Oh, wow.
That'll keep us busy for a while. But anyway, let's dive into the content today, which is why people come here for us to try to be comedians.
Yelling 4.
So we are, by the way, do you hear the music or not, Anika?
Vaguely, yes, I do.
A little bit, vaguely?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we are looking at how you can save thousands of dollars through different exams or through creative college programs. And I've got about 6 or 7 in here. 7, maybe. What I'd like to do is go pretty fast through ones we've talked about quite a bit in the past and really hang our hat on some of the ones that we haven't talked about as much.
Okay.
So we want to just go take one at a time, Anika? We don't have a college spotlight today, so
let's combine the first 2 together, the exams. You got the AP exam and the IB exam, which they pretty much act the same, right? In terms of getting the credit. So you get the exam, you get a certain score, and then you get college credit for that score. So hence 1 less class you have to take in college.
I like your idea, Nika, of combining the 2. Combining the AP and the IB. What were your takeaways from the content here?
Well, the main thing was the score that you're getting, because people think, I just remember the AP, people think a 3 is a good score, but 4 is where you really get into, I don't know. Well, this is a question. Was the 4 where you get into certain schools, to get credit from, or is it just a 4 across the board?
Yeah, let me put some flesh on those bones. So you will hear people say a 3 is a pass for AP. And that is standard. You'll hear that. It's kind of official rhetoric that a 3 is considered passing. However, when it comes to getting college credit, it's not passing that matters. It's getting a qualifying score that matters.
Right.
Qualifying score is a score that qualifies you to either get college credit and come in with college credit, which is what we're talking about here, because that's the money savings. Or some schools don't give college credit at all anymore. They just let you opt out of core requirements. But that's called a qualifying score. And what you need to do for that is you need to just Google the name of the school and look up AP credit policy.
Okay.
And then it will tell you what a qualifying score is. And what you'll find is it's very common for the score to be different for every single subject. So a school might say a 3 in French is a qualifying score and a 5 in U.S. history. And it varies from subject to subject sometimes. That's just based on the school doing their own research and knowing how well students are actually prepared for college work if they've had that particular score.
Okay.
So that's true for AP. And for IB, it's a little bit different. IP has standard exams and higher level exams. And normally you'll find the scores you're going to need to get the scores in the higher level exams. And most commonly you'll see that you'll need a 5, a 6, or a 7 to get a qualifying score for the IB. So the point here is it's going to completely vary from school to school.
Mm-hmm.
In general, this is a little bit of an overgeneralization. Public schools tend to be more lenient. You'll see some really, really top-notch public schools that will still give AP credit for 3s. You tend not to find that with private schools.
Okay.
And so some people think they don't want to give that tuition up.
Great.
All right, so that's good. We bucketed those two. You want to talk about dual enrollment? That's the next one.
Yeah, so dual enrollment, which we never dived into dual enrollment or never had any experiences with it, but it's basically it's the high school kids that are taking these, and I believe there's a lot of times where, before COVID, they were actually on the college campus taking college courses and getting college credit. Is that right?
Yeah, both of my kids took dual enrollment, private school, just for background, and both of Anika's kids went to boarding schools, one in Pennsylvania, one in Virginia. I worked with her on both of those placements and then both of their colleges as well. But my kids went to a private day school in Atlanta that had dual enrollment. Mm-hmm. And so the way it can work one of two ways. You can actually either be on the college campus or it can be a partnership where it's done online remotely.
Okay.
But with dual enrollment, often also called dual credit, it varies from school to school whether or not they will accept those credits and give you actual credit for it. Some more selective schools like Davidson, for example, they had the policy that said that you cannot get credit for high school and for college by taking the same course. Mm-hmm. So they would not give credit to Kara. She had the dual enrollment, but it didn't count for any college credit. But it is still considered a more rigorous course. But we're talking about getting college credit, coming in with saving thousands of dollars here by either exams or creative programs. Mm-hmm. I think that's enough on that. Anything else you want us to say on that? You want to move on?
No, but I think that's good. Let's see the next. Oh, now this one I've actually just been hearing more of in the past couple of years, I guess, is these accelerated degree programs, where it's like a 3-year versus a 4-year accomplishment.
Yeah, and I'd actually like us to talk about this quite a bit because I haven't talked about this very much on the podcast. Mm-hmm. I did my college spotlight on SLU a couple of weeks ago, St. Louis University. We talked about their 3-year degree. Mm-hmm. But I'm just going to go through and mention a good chunk of the schools that offer them. There's a lot of schools, Anika, that offer this. So Bates College, they've actually had a 3-year college degree program all the way back since 1965. Now, their program's a little unique. You have to take 5 courses each semester, and then you also have to take a unit in what they call their short term. And most students are typically taking 4 courses a semester. So, you can expect with these, you're going to have to do something a little extra. Mm-hmm. This is one I talked about when I did the college spotlight on Ball State. Ball State has had a 3-year degree program, and they've had that since 2005. And it's available in over 30 different academic programs that they offer. Chatham University in Pittsburgh, they've had one since 2009. It's their Bachelor of Interior Design. That's a 3-year program. By the way, let me just say this. Nico's like, where are you getting all this stuff?
I know that brain of yours.
This little here section is not in my book. It's a little add-on. But I wanted to really kind of hang our hat on this because I know in the past we've talked about dual enrollment, dual credit. We've talked about AP. We've talked about IB. My goal with every podcast is for the most experienced listener. You could be 50 years in college admissions. If you're listening to this, I want you to learn something you didn't know before. So this is kind of some new content I know we've never discussed before. So Lake Forest College in Lake Forest, Illinois, they started their 3-year bachelor's program in 2009, and that's in philosophy and communications. They also have some dual degree programs as well, but we'll talk about that in a second. Lipscomb in Tennessee, they've got a 3-year program. It involves 2 additional summers that you have to do, but they estimate the savings is substantial. Some people actually just go in and get a master's a year early. Hartwick in New York, they've got a 3-year program as well that can apply to many different majors. Their program does not involve summer or online study. Southern Oregon University, they have a 3-year program as well for students, and it applies to it's mostly students that actually come in with very high GPAs. It's mostly designed for them. It's their ACC BACC program. It actually reduces the number of credits required to graduate, because what they do is they, in effect, give you some credit from what you've already done for your excellence in high school, which is a unique program. Here's one that you should know about, Anika.
What's that?
You can guess what I'm going to say. It's close to you. UNCG.
Oh, okay.
How far would UNCG be from you? Not far at all.
No, it's like up the street from A&T.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
I don't know if our listeners know this, but did I tell you this? That North Carolina A&T recruited Joy for basketball?
Yeah, you did. At one time. Yeah, you did.
Yeah, so we did like an official visit there and went through the whole basketball thing, meet all the trainer, get the red carpet treatment, tickets to the game, all that stuff. And then, UNCG was basically across the street.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so UNCG, they've got a 3-year program in actually 17 different academic programs that they have for students. So it's pretty cool.
Okay. And it's never too late, Joy, by the way. It's never too late.
She has 3 credits to graduate from UGA.
Never too late.
But it's a good point, because she's applying to like 5 different grad schools.
Mm-hmm. See what I just say?
6 grad schools.
Mm-hmm.
She's applying to UGA. It's her only Georgia school. Hampton, it's her only Virginia school. And then in the state of North Carolina A&T, North Carolina State, and North Carolina UNCC, University of North Carolina at Charlotte. She would apply to Chapel Hill, but they don't have her program.
Okay.
It's not accredited. So anyway,
I'm not worried about them. So she's good.
So you may get her. The last application she turned in was due February 1st. Okay. University of Massachusetts Amherst, they have a 3-year pathway program in economic sociology and music. And so that's another one of these 3-year credit programs. And once again, it's kind of like the last one I read. It's designed for those who have amassed considerable AP or IB credits. So they look at people that have had, substantial amount of AP or IB credits, which we just spoke about. So this is dovetailing nicely into this. And then they expect you to average 16 credits a semester, and then you can graduate in 3 years. Sterling College in Vermont, they have one. They started that in 2010. It's a traditional 2-semester college program. But once again, teaching 3 semesters over a 12-month period, 3 to 5 week breaks in between. Then you have Mount St. Mary's in Maryland, and they have a 3-year degree program for any major available at the university. So that's a huge push. And obviously, these things are a great way of promoting cost savings and saving a year and getting out in the workforce a little earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Got a few more. American University, their School of International Services has a 3-year BA program. And that's one of the top programs. I mean, I'm always recommending this school. Their Global Scholars Program, highly selective course of study program for outstanding freshmen. And they have 25 students, actually, that are involved in this program that enroll in the 3-year program. It's their International Service Program, their SIS program, School of International Service. Judson in Illinois has got a 3-year program for business. Bluffton in Ohio's got a 3-year program and 12 different programs. Grace College in Indiana has got a 3-year program, accelerated program for 50 of its different majors. So a pretty significant program. Lesley in Massachusetts has a 3-year program as well. St. John Staten Island campus has a 3-year program. And they estimate the savings is over $30,000 for that. Ashland in Columbus has one for 12 different bachelor's programs. Kent State, also in Ohio, has one. Both of those last two schools, they started theirs in 2012. Kent State's is for 22 different programs. Akron, also in Ohio, they started in 2012. So you know what's going on in 2012 in Ohio. Everybody's jumping on the bandwagon. Hey, my competitor's doing it. Akron is for 30 different programs. University of Houston, they've got a program, and they actually freeze tuition for students that do the 3-year program. So not only are they saving you a year, they're guaranteeing you no tuition increases. Thomas More in Kentucky's got a 3-year program that's available for pretty much every one of their majors except for nursing and education. Oh, a school that I really want to do a college spotlight on, Wentworth Institute of Technology, 3-year program in building construction management. University of Iowa's got a 3-year program as well for a number of different majors. That's the Big Ten, the university there. And then Purdue, also in the Big Ten. They have a newer program started in 2016. It's their Brian Lamb School of Communication. It's 5 different majors they have that can be combined into 3 years, saving students a lot of time. And then I have a few left here. Belmont Abbey. Oh, Belmont Abbey. You know that school probably, right, Anika?
Where is that?
No? It's outside of Charlotte. They offer Joy Scholarship, Division II basketball. And it's a Benedictine Catholic school. So we were there for the official visit, and they always give you tickets to these basketball games when you go. And there's these Benedictine monks on campus, the monks. And Joy got freaked out by the monks. She's like, look, the monks are hovering over the girls when they're sitting on the bench. It's freaking me out.
Good gracious.
So that was just not for her. Ursuline in Ohio's got a 3-year program for nursing students. NYU, a very popular school. They just announced in 2017 their 3-year program. It's part of an initiative designed to make college more affordable. You do need to take 18 credits a semester to get through there. SUNY Potsdam, one of the SUNY schools, has a 3-year program as well. It is for students with a GPA of either 95 coming in out of high school, and you do have to maintain a 3.25 while you're at SUNY in order to stay in the program, and it's expected you're going to take 17 to 18 credit hours. I have 2 left because Anika's thinking, how long is this list? I know you. 4 years, you can read someone's mind.
Yes, success.
Arcadia, which is in Glenside, PA. I didn't live very far from there. I lived about 18 miles from there when I lived in Mount Airy, Philadelphia. So they have a 3-year program as well, primarily for psychology, international studies, international business, and media and communication. It does involve 2 summers. And then the last one is the University of San Francisco. So there you go. I wanted to hang our hat there because I've never talked about that before. I wanted to give some people new content.
All right. Well, you got it. You got it in there.
Anika and I are so grateful for everyone who has financially supported our podcast. It allows us to pay our staff and cover our other auxiliary expenses involved in having a weekly professional podcast.
At the start of every month, we're going to start sending a special gift to anyone who financially supports your college-bound kid.
I will be sending our donors this bonus content once a month directly to your email. The bonus content will be between 10 to 15 minutes in length. Usually it will be a college-related topic that I'm passionate about. Occasionally, it'll be another bonus hot topic in the news segment. Sometimes it'll be an answer to a question that one of our listeners submits to us via email.
And you'll receive these monthly audio blogs for a gift of any amount. We know that $5,000 to one person is $5 to someone else, and we don't want your budget to be a hindrance to you receiving this additional bonus content. So if you want to support our show, just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com and click the donate button. And if you've already financially supported our podcast, you will automatically start receiving this bonus content via your email.
This bonus content is our way of letting our financial supporters know in a tangible way how much we appreciate you. And if you have any questions at all about our monthly bonus content, just send your questions our way. That's to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Once again, questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. A couple more here, Nico. We'll try to go a little quicker through these.
Okay. All right. So this next one is like a different version of accelerated to me because it's the combined, you're getting a bachelor's and a master's at one time.
Yep.
Which I think I've only heard of like a couple, maybe one person doing that. I was like, wait, what? That was kind
It's
of
pretty common. It's growing too. So in the chapter, I give examples of Mercer right here in Georgia. Another great school I haven't done a spotlight on, but I'm going to. They have combinations of engineering and combos and business combinations and accounting combinations, and you can get the undergrad and the master's and save a lot of time. And we've been doing spotlights on and talking about these. We've talked about pharmacy programs, accelerated pharmacy programs. We talked about SLUS, accelerated physical therapy programs. So yeah, you can shave 1 and sometimes even 2 years off these programs.
Okay. How rigorous are those though? Is that just for not the faint at heart or?
No, they're rigorous.
Yeah.
They usually have high GPAs to get into them.
Okay. Oh, okay. So there is some qualifying there, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because they're, people still want you to come out as prepared as if you took the longer route.
Right.
So they're jamming a lot in and moving faster.
Okay. Now, I only have one more on my list. You might have 2 more, but I got the last one I have is the co-op program where you're actually getting paid to do these. Really, you're working. The way I see it is like you take a semester and you work somewhere, you get paid, but you're still enrolled within your university, relevant to your program, of course.
Yeah. And you're making you're working full time. So, you're saving money. And here's a quote I have in the chapter. This was a few years ago, but it said, in reference to Georgia Tech, this is right off their website, 1,713 undergraduate students participated in co-op, and their earnings were over $10 million. So it's an opportunity to some of these co-ops. Now, look, I don't want to get people's hopes up here, but one student from Northeastern last year, Anika, she worked at Google and got $6,000 a month with a $2,000 stipend.
Wow.
Now, that's not normal, so I don't think that's the way it is. But the point is because they were trying to lure her. She was hot. And, it was an all-out war for talent. So they're trying to lure her in and get her in their culture so that then they can just make her an offer.
Okay.
But typically you'll see, 17 to 20 an hour is not uncommon. Depending on the major, you're going to see higher pay in the tech field. And some co-ops are not pay. I do want to get that out there. There are some co-ops that are volunteerism that are not pay. And so, fortunately, not 100% of them are pay. They're real work experience. So I had 2 others here, Anika. I had graduate partnerships where there's guaranteed savings. So, for example, Mercer has a very unique program where if you do your undergrad in business at Mercer, and you want to stay on at Mercer for your grad school, they take 30% off of the grad school fees.
Okay.
So it's like a guaranteed savings if you go to the grad school of the same undergrad. And then the last one I had on the last page is tuition-free schools. Tuition-free schools. There are
right. Yeah.
schools out there where tuition doesn't cost you anything. And so a lot of people know. Let me just mention 5 or 6 of them. And so Alice Lloyd College. Okay, if you're a resident of Kentucky, Ohio, Tennessee, Virginia, or West Virginia, basically the Appalachian region, then you get work jobs, but you don't have to pay tuition. College of the Ozarks, Missouri. You've got a 15-hour work week there. And students are expected to work 40 hours a week over a couple of their breaks. And they do look for kids with high financial need, but that's a tuition-free option. You got the Curtis Institute of Music. For over 95 years now, they've offered full tuition scholarships. But this is a serious conservatory. Guess what the acceptance rate is at Curtis, Anika?
8%.
4%.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they only take 175 kids. But hey, if you're gifted and talented enough to get in, then they've raised the money for you. And then, of course, obviously, you have the Air Force and the Coast Guard and the Merchant Marines and the Military Academy, Naval Academy, Webb Institute, Naval Architecture. One other really good one is Cooper Union, which is in New York City. Architecture, fine arts, and engineering. And tuition covered. Now, you have fees still of around $1,000, and you have room and boards about $16,000. But those are the free options. Any comments?
Okay. We love the free.
I actually want to close by reading a quote. I have my stories at the back of each chapter. This is one story I want to read. So, and I remember this like it was just the other day. So I said, a few years ago, I was touring at Emory University, and we had a very charismatic and engaging tour guide. I'll add, this is in the story, but he was from Maryland, I remember. And at the end of the tour, one of the parents asked the tour guide what advice he had to share. And the tour guide said, Don't slack off just because you get admitted. He went on to say, I'm so glad I kept studying hard on my AP exams. If you need to get a tutor, get a tutor. He said, I got 4s and 5s on my AP exams, and I started with a half a year of college credit, and am I ever glad that I did? And didn't just cruise to get admitted. So that's just a little word of advice.
All right, we'll take it.
It's time for a question from one of our listeners.
All right, Mark, this question for the week. Let's see. Who is this question from? This question is from Zola. Is Zola a female or a male? Is that Miss Zola?
Female.
Okay, Miss Zola.
Mm-hmm.
Zola wants to learn more about Pomona and some of the routes to getting in. And she's especially interested in hearing about the early decision and early action compared to their regular decision process. And, she wants to know about how many students are recruited that are athletes or from the QuestBridge-like programs. All about Pomona.
Let's dive in. But before we dive into Pomona, I do want to thank Jillian for her excellent question last week. We had more emails about that question, how much they appreciate that question and that answer about, sort of what level of extracurriculars you need getting into a selective school. So it really hit a nerve out there. So thank you for that. And by the way, we could use a few more questions. Normally we have a good 8 to 10 in the kitty. Right now, I think we're down to maybe like 4 or so. So, we could get you on in about 5 weeks from now if you send a question in and it's approved. We only accept the best questions that we think a lot of our listeners will be interested in. All right. So let's get into this question from Zola. So this question, it's kind of like I say we're not doing a college spotlight this week, but this is like a little mini college spotlight, but it's just the statistical part. So let's go over a bunch of stuff. I'm going to give a bunch of background about Pomona. By the way, Pomona is one of those schools that is in that 1%. So let me say that 1% of the hardest schools to get into in the country. It's one of 5 liberal arts colleges that would be on that list. Along with them would be Williams, Amherst, Swarthmore, and Claremont McKenna. And just knocking on the cusp of that hardest 1% to get in would be Harvey Mudd, which is also in the Claremont colleges, along with Claremont McKenna and Pomona. It's a school I'm very familiar with. Pomona, I send people there most years. I have multiple students there now. So let's talk about it. So Pomona will offer admission to 745 students. That's how many they accepted last year. And of those 745, 49 states were represented, plus the District of Columbia, Guam, and Puerto Rico. They also had students from 45 other countries. They also had 8 students who were admitted in a previous year and had deferred enrollment until this year. Of the students, 52% female, 48% male, 58.8% domestic students of color. Now, how does that break down? 19.3% Latina or Latino, 17.9% Asian American, 14.2% Black, 6.6% multiracial, 0.8% Native American, and 25.1% white, and then 13.6% international. So it was about as diverse a school as you're going to find. Of course, a lot of the California schools are extremely diverse because California does have such a large Latino and Asian population and multiracial population. Of the Native American students, 5 of them were American Indian, Native Alaskan, and 1 was Hawaiian. First generation students, meaning neither parent had a 4-year college degree, were 20.7% of those students. And I'm talking about last year's class, the class of 2024. This year's class, still waiting for some more information to come out, of course, on that. Regular decision's not even out yet for that. The school also admitted 26 transfer students. Of those 26 transfer students, 12 of them were admitted directly from a community college, and 10 of those were first generation students. Okay, a little bit more. 90% of the students were in the top 10% of their class. Middle 50% of the scores, 700 to 760, evidence-based reading and writing, 710 to 790 on the math, ACT 32 to 35. 22.2% of the students indicated that their first choice major was humanities. 18.9% said it was social sciences. 29.8% said natural sciences. 23.6% said some type of interdisciplinary field. Now, where did they come from? Of course, Pomona, for those you don't know, it's in Claremont, which is 45 minutes west of Los Angeles. So 174 were from California, 53 from New York, 43 from Illinois, 36 from Texas, 32 from Washington, 27 from Florida, 18 from Massachusetts, 17 from New Jersey, 15 from Maryland. Those are the top states. Now, the last time I visited Pomona, actually, it's not the last time, the time before the last time I visited Pomona, I met with their admission office and they said, Mark, we had 12 kids from Georgia. We want more kids from Georgia. Send us more kids. So Georgia didn't quite make the list of their top states. It cut off at Maryland at 15 here. They also had students from 45 countries. And the largest country was China with 19, then India with 8, Hong Kong, Kenya, Turkey, and the UK all had 7. Canada had 6. Singapore and South Korea had 5. Brazil, Greece, and Japan had 4. And all students came from 634 different schools across the country. Now, their admission office visited 671 high schools in 41 different states. And almost 27,000 students and visitors were hosted on campus for tours or admission sessions. So that's a little bit of an overview there. Now, she asked specifically about QuestBridge. They took 16 QuestBridge students, and they took 20 students from Posse Foundation. So those are the 2 largest CBOs, community-based organizations in the country, and they supply highly selective schools with gifted and talented, diverse applicants. So 16 from QuestBridge, 20 from Posse. I was going to do a much deeper dive into QuestBridge, but I went so long, Anika, with that long list of rolling out the 3 years. I'm going to table that and come back for another time because people should know about QuestBridge. They're sending thousands of kids to these top schools. So I'll come back and do a deeper dive on QuestBridge another time.
Okay.
Let's talk about early decision because Zola specifically asked about early decision and about athletics. So they admitted 306 students by ED. Okay, that's 41% of the class came in by ED because it's a smaller school. And what people should realize is that's pretty normal for one of these schools. It's in the top 1 or 2% of the most selective schools. They typically admit between 1/3 and 65% of their when I say they admit, I'm not saying that's the acceptance rate. I'm saying that's the percentage of the incoming class. So in other words, when you said what percentage of people came in the freshman class were admitted by ED, 41% came in by ED. And that's actually a little on the lower side, like Claremont McKenna, which is a stone's throw away. Some years that number is in the 60s for them. They can take 2/3 of their students through early decision, but it's still a lot. It doesn't leave a lot of spots for regular admission at a small school. The acceptance rate for early decision applicants is around 15% in most years. The acceptance rate for regular admissions is closer to 5%. The overall acceptance rate in the low 7s. And as far as athletics are concerned, so I don't have a precise number with athletics, but what I can tell you is they compete in the Southern California Intercollegiate Athletic Association, and they have a joint team with Pomona and Pitzer. They're called the Sage Hens. How's that for a name, Anika? The Sage Hens. It doesn't sound like it's intimidating anybody. And what I can say is that the Southern California Intercollegiate Athletic Association does not have the emphasis on athletics that you see in the NESCAT conference, where you get schools like Williams and Amherst and others that have made athletics a much bigger part of their admissions process and their recruitment. So close to 1/3 of the students do play a varsity sport, but how many of them come through the recruitment process? I don't know for sure. My guess is it's probably half that at most that are actually tagged as recruited athletes as opposed to walk-ons, just because it's not a huge athletic culture and a huge focus on athletics there as much as some of their competitors. So that's an overview, Anika. But what jumped off the page at you? This is what I say to Dave after every spotlight. So you can be Dave for a few minutes.
It's all about the diversity for me. I mean, I love that.
Yeah, I knew you were loving those diversity numbers, weren't you?
Yep.
According to niche.com, Pomona is the most diverse school in the country.
That's always numero uno for me. But
here's the thing about Pomona. Pomona's got almost $3 billion endowment.
Good gracious. Good
yes,
Lord.
It's one of the wealthiest schools in the country. I mean, one of the absolute wealthiest schools in the country. It's funny. I was, when you see endowments listed, they list them by just overall endowment, right? So you'll see Harvard up there with close to 40 billion in that. But what you really need to do is look at endowment per person. And then, I first learned this by having conversations with Emory's director of financial aid. He's like, Mark, you got to separate the schools that have hospitals versus the schools that don't have hospitals, because so much of that endowed money is allocated to fund the hospital. And so he was the first one who told me that when you look at schools like Pomona and Williams and Princeton, those are probably the wealthiest schools in the country, because when you look at their per student endowment and then you take away the fact that they're not funding hospitals, they actually really have more freed up money to use for things like financial aid. So that allows them to have such a wide range of diversity without having to worry about money, because there are a lot of schools that really want to have a lot of diversity, and they don't have that diversity because they just can't have it financially. Like they need more people that can pay full tuition. Wow. But they are really one of the schools that's in a very unique position. In fact, right now they have a huge fundraising drive on to raise even more money, Anika, to go to financial aid. So what they want to do is they want to be able to give financial aid at much higher levels of income than they currently are doing right now. You know, kind of like, you know, Harvard's got this really cool 10% plan. You can make $160,000 at Harvard. You only pay $16,000, and it's really hard for people to compete against that. And so Pomona, I think, is trying to match that by going dollar for dollar with that, and they're well on their way with their fundraising drive. But you know, a lot of that Silicon Valley money up there in Northern California then ended up trickling down into Pomona.
Wow. Okay, Pomona, let's go.
Well, a few more stats I probably should share. Total enrollment, 1,655 students. Total number of students that receive financial aid, 56%. Total number of students that receive the Pell Grant, 23%. That's actually really high for a private school. 1 in 4 students getting Pell Grant. Like you usually see those numbers at public schools, not at you know, really elite private schools. But that's because they have the money to do it.
Clearly.
You go, Pomona, one of my favorite schools. Okay, friends, Amin is back, but this time we're not talking about additional information section anymore. We're talking about Wesleyan University. And in this part 1, Amin gives an overview of Wesleyan, talks about what makes it special. He talks about the open curriculum and what does that mean at Wesleyan. And after this, Amin talks about some of the strongest academic programs and majors at Wesleyan. Amin closes this segment by discussing Wesleyan's cross apps. Listen and enjoy.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
Let's talk about Wesleyan. School that's very dear to your heart, a place that you only graduated from as a student, but you've actually had a chance to work there on more than one occasion. So why don't you take 3 to 5 minutes to give us an overview of Wes, because I don't know anybody that could do a better job than you. You know, we did have Cliff Thornton on in year 1. So, but that was a long time ago. We're up to episode 150. Oh, we're way up into the 150s now. And Cliff was on episode 30. So that's, we do one a week.
All
so
right.
Yeah, it was a good 2.5 years ago. So, but tell us about Wes.
Sure. And Cliff's always good company to keep. So happy to be mentioned in the same breath with him, a dear friend and colleague and mentor. So Wes, originally for me, as you know, I graduated from here, came here as an undergrad. And what attracted me as a student going through the process was the dynamic diversity of the space, of the energy of the community, the openness in terms of culture, atmosphere, but also curriculum, that it was certainly not a conservative environment, dynamic, diverse, open, accessible, balanced in all the ways that matter to me. I was a recruited student athlete. I had gone to independent school and did not want to be a pink poodle again. Wanted to be in an environment where I could see myself mirrored in my peers and in faculty and have conversations that stretched me in ways that I couldn't fully have anticipated, because at the time, diversity was strictly racial and ethnic. And what Wesleyan did for me as a student was open my eyes to the reality that there's a great deal of diversity within diversity, and it's more diversity of perspective and experience as much as it is by background. And so those things, kept me coming back. This is now my 3rd return to Middletown, to Wesleyan. I started as an assistant dean came back as an associate after years away, and then most recently as dean. And I would say those descriptors that I've used still hold true. The place is familiar enough that I feel comfortable each time I've come back, but has been different enough that I can't be complacent. And that's one of the values of the space, of this environment, is that it's an education and an experience. And it's just that. It's not just an education, it's an experience that's meant to prepare you for any number of eventualities, right? You're not training for an occupation. You're not pursuing an education for prestige or for a bumper sticker or for, the outcome. It is the experience of the people that you're going to share your journey with. I often say that a lot of students think of colleges as places that are going to make them into who they're going to become. So that the institution makes the individual. At Wesleyan, the individuals make the institution. Their energy, their passion, their social conscience, and political activism really feed, the institution broadly. And, that's what keeps me coming back, is I feel both young and, sort of vital, and encouraged and motivated to do things that matter, right? To think about education as a tool and as an engine of opportunity, right? And not simply a perpetuation of privilege, that those who have much are going to continue to have much by virtue of this education that is elitist or that is inaccessible. And we continue to strive to, we're not perfect by any means, but long before institutions embraced the DEI work being done nationally and sort of the racial reckoning that the country's engaged in, Wesleyan was at the forefront of this for many years, of championing, diversity and access, with the Vanguard class of 1969 of students of color, African-American students in particular, and going coeducation long before many others. So I've, really relished and enjoyed and celebrated my time here, because it's where I learned to think. It's where I grew into my consciousness, not only my intellectual consciousness, but also my spiritual consciousness. I embraced my faith as an undergrad here. I was a history major and studied in Cairo and learned Arabic and pursued Islam, having come in here as a Catholic student. But I learned to think critically and creatively. And this place champions that kind of constructive, critical engagement with ideas and with their implementation. It's not enough to know. It's important to act on what you know. So we talk about practical idealism, and we think about, in a spiritual sense, not to be to go down that path too much, but in my tradition,
go for it. Don't hold back.
Yeah, in my tradition, the saying often goes, for those who believe and work righteous deeds. So belief without action is useless, as is action without intention. And so here we're trying to put ideas, into impact and to influence, for greater good in society.
Oh, that's great stuff.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Friends, how did I know that there were 361 students admitted to Pomona by early decision in the class of 2024? I'll tell you how. I follow Pomona on their college admissions Twitter account. And my recommended resource for episode 158 is that you start following colleges that you're interested on their Twitter account. Now, not the college in general, although I recommend that as well, but I'm specifically talking about their admissions account. And in the show notes, we'll put a link to Pomona's admissions because we featured them in this podcast. But you can just go to Twitter, search Pomona admissions, and then you click follow. And the nice thing is they're going to have a drop down. And I'm looking at it right now. It says you might like. In this case, it's HMC admission, Harvey Mudd. So you want to follow them, you follow them. And then there's another drop down, show more, it says. And it'll give a number of other college admissions Twitter accounts that are similar to the one that you just followed. And it's a great way to build up your list of college admissions accounts to follow. It's a really good way to get news as soon as it breaks. Oh, and by the way, while you're at it, follow us at YCBK Podcast. At YCBK Podcast. I went back and listened to some past episodes, and 3 times when I gave our podcast handle, I gave the wrong handle. So it's at YCBK Podcast. We share a lot of stuff in advance, up and coming articles, speakers, and things like that, and kind of starting to create a little bit of a community there. So love to have you join us. But for now, the recommended resource is the college admissions Twitter accounts that you're interested in, and then use the search more feature to identify other schools and follow them, and you'll be the first to know the breaking news. Now return to my interview with Amin Gonzalez. Now, one of the things I know a lot of students I work with like about Wesleyan is, if you consider yourself a full open curriculum, you're certainly much more open than the overwhelming majority of schools. Can you talk a little bit about that and, why Wesleyan chooses to, what that means and how that impacts the culture?
Sure. So as a liberal arts college, for those that may not be fully aware of what that means exactly, it essentially means that students don't have to know immediately upon arrival, even when they apply, what their major is going to be or what occupation they're going to pursue. There's an expectation and, in fact, requirement that they explore. So roughly 1/3 of our program is in a major. 1/3 is meeting a distribution sort of expectations, not a requirement, recommendation. And then the remaining third, is to do whatever they want. And so our students can double major by design. Some double major by default. They have an established interest that they're pursuing, but they're, continuing to take a course in another area and find that they're very close to completing that. So we feel like we balance providing students the appropriate amount of guidance, right? And at the same time, the maximum amount of flexibility. So it is not going to be something that they have to conform themselves to and squeeze themselves into a specific program, or that they're going to be lost at sea and there's not going to be curricular coherence to their educational journey. It's not as simple as take any 10 classes you want in a discipline and have the degree, but rather, does your education make sense and is it sound within the discipline that you're pursuing? And how does that position you to either pursue graduate study or be better prepared to enter the workforce, and to be a responsible citizen, a consumer of information, and an engaged contributor to society.
That's great. Why don't you talk a little bit about either some programs or areas of study that Wesleyan's really well known for that tend to attract a lot of students, as well as some areas of strength that maybe you're not as well known for, but you maybe should be well known for. As somebody who knows the institution and works at the institution, that, boy, we're really good in this area, whether it's a academic area or it's some other component of the school that maybe the national population, does not know as much about.
Sure. So we're a liberal arts college that sort of celebrates interdisciplinarity and has strong majors across various areas. So, economics, biology, psychology, English are very popular majors, but we also have interdisciplinary colleges like the College of Social Studies. We have new programs in film and the moving image. So a variety of areas, but our graduate opportunities in the sciences are what make us a university, because we confer, PhDs and masters in 6 of the natural sciences and math, and also in ethnomusicology. So for students who want a broad-based liberal arts education and at the same time to have access to research conducted by faculty in an environment that's not cutthroat competitive, this is an exciting place because they can get exposed and be engaged in research very early on. And a number of our students, are first or second authors, co-authors on publications, and won't stay with us, to pursue graduate study. Although they can get a 5th year master's tuition free for the small number that want to do that. Many go on to other institutions because they want to pursue a PhD. So I would say the sciences are, generally speaking, an area in which we thrive, but are not necessarily known as much for at the undergraduate level. It's mostly, many of the humanities. The film, now the College of Film and Moving Image is phenomenal. And we had a significant impact in Hollywood through a number of, directors, actors, screenwriters. Our impact in Hollywood is disproportionate to our size. We punch in above our weight and have done extraordinarily well in that space. But, I really think that our strength is across all dimensions, and I don't want to leave any department or school off. I think it's really the charge of students to become better informed about the programs that they're interested in, and then compare, apples to apples and not apples to oranges, so that if you have a criteria for schools bubbling up on your list, that you're looking at them similarly and not comparing, colleges to universities and graduate programs or research opportunities and placement rates when there's not consistency some of the data or some of the access points to those experiences.
Well, I commend you for answering that, because that's a question I like to ask all of the deans and directors and senior level people that we have on the podcast. And a lot of times it's met with, what are you trying to do? Get me in trouble with my faculty? I can't leave anything out.
It's all good. It's all good. I tell you, test me, challenge me if you wish.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your overlap schools. I mean, who are they? And when students select you over the overlaps, what are the reasons they tell you they chose you?
So we haven't, I'll start with the overlaps. I mean, I think I was just talking to, I didn't mention at the outset by way of introduction, I'm also the parent of 4. I have a college senior and a college junior, as well as 2 young daughters. My junior starting his search. He's been starting from long before, but he's really starting in earnest now. And we were talking about, some of these things about this process earlier. So overlaps could be that there are, that you share a conference. So if you think about the Ivy League, right, there are overlaps there just by virtue of shared athletic conference, or schools that have similar values and identities and experiences. We overlap with a lot of institutions. We're part of the NESCAC, the New England Small College Athletic Conference, which includes small liberal arts colleges in New England, as well as some universities like Tufts. We are part of the COFI, Consortium on Financing Higher Education, one of the original institutions there. We have overlap with universities, small colleges, geographic. I would say the places that are perhaps, and I don't have the data on this, I should probably tread with a little bit of caution. There used to be the ASQ, where you could get more information, admitted student questionnaire about students that were cross-admitted to other schools and why they may have chosen them. I haven't looked at that data in a little while, but certainly a good amount of overlap with schools like Brown, Oberlin, Amherst, Williams, all of the NESCAC schools, as well as places like NYU and others. So I don't think there's a specific subset that we don't have some crossover lab, certainly with the Ivies, given where we are in Connecticut, with some other places. But we are distinctive. We're not for everyone. We think of ourselves as a place that can be accessible and should be accessible and inviting to all, but also recognize that there's an experience here that students have to try on for size and visit and engage when the time is appropriate to do so, to test. The reasons I think that students pick us over some of our chief competitors when there is overlap, what I hear anecdotally from students in conversations, I don't have the data on this oftentimes, is that there's a very strong sense of community and inclusion and energy, that there isn't a pretentiousness amongst our students. This is not an elitist environment, even though we are selective, highly selective in admission criteria, and attract talented and enroll talented, compelling students. Because of the breadth of the talent in our community, students aren't competing in cutthroat competition with one another. There's room for all to shine in their own way, and they bring out the best in each other. And that way it feels different than some other environments where there is a mad dash toward the accolades, toward the achievements that are going to best position them for the next destination. So our students are fully immersed. They're at West, and they're not looking at the next destination and see it simply as a stepping stone to that. They're fully present in that mindfulness sense, fully engaged, not just locally, but broadly, and thinking about that impact that I mentioned earlier, but not so much 10, 15, 20 years down the road. It's the immediacy of that community, that proximity, that engagement that matters. So I hear a lot about that, about the openness, not just of the curriculum, but of the individuals, the sense of warmth, community, and for lack of a better term, down to earthness, that they're not just earthy, but cool and chill and accessible.
Next week in the news, the mess that is elite college admissions, explained by a former dean, an article in Vox by Jason England. Mark and Anika will discuss what are the pros and cons of using a home equity loan, otherwise known as a HELOC, to pay for college. Our question from listener is, does financial aid work any differently for students born abroad but who have done all their schooling in the U.S. versus other international students? Our interview is part 2 of 2 with Amin Gonzalez, the Vice President and Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid at Wesleyan University, on Understanding Wesleyan. And once again, there will not be a college spotlight, since Amin will be talking about Understanding Wesleyan.
Dave, I can't wait next week to talk to you about the article. I've been itching to read this. One of my most excited I've ever been about an article. So It's called The Mess That Is Elite College Admissions by a former dean. And the subtitle is 8 Things I Wish People Understood About My Old Job. So we're really going to be unpacking some of the behind the scenes. If you're one of these people that likes to know how the sausage is made, Dave and I are delving into it. See you next week.
Awesome.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. Your College Bound Kid is produced by Dave Vasaya of podcastengineers.com. If you find this podcast helpful, it would help us tremendously if you would subscribe and write us a review on your favorite podcast listening station. And please be sure to click the share button and send this to someone you know that can really use this information. The amazing music that you hear is by Victor Allen Weeks. Our image editor is Tauha Khan. Webmaster is Stalianos Dimitru. And marketing designs are by Kimberly Blass. And if you want to get a copy of the book, 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions, you can go right to 171answers.com. And if you want to have a college coaching session with Mark, you can send him a text to area code 404-664-4340. And if you have a question or a few questions that you would like to ask us, and we'll include them on the show, you can just email us at questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Every week, we'll take one question and include it in the episode. We don't like your questions. We love your questions. So send them our way. And by the way, check out our website, yourcollegeboundkid.com. Again, we thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to meeting with you again next week.